I received a tip-off in April of 2024 about a channel called Inspector Tech, a Canadian YouTube channel who had come across an extremely rare system. It brings two worlds together that I love so much, the world of the Commodore Amiga computer system and the world of arcade video machines, full-sized cabinets in all their glory. I reached out to Aaron, who runs the channel, Inspector Tech, and asked him if he'd be willing to sell the system, and incredibly, he was happy to do that. It took 5 months to get it over here, in part due to my parental leave and in part due to some courier issues that we had along the way. But we managed to get through it, and a big thank you to Aaron for his patience throughout that whole process. The system that he discovered was called the Arcadia Systems Super Select System. Extremely rare. I wouldn't blame you if you'd never heard of it, because I hadn't until more recent years, and I certainly never saw one in the wild in the late 80s when it was current. So we're going to use it as an opportunity to form the basis of this new Trash to Treasure series. And like every Trash to Treasure series, we inspect it, we restore it, we clean it, and we try to present at the end of it a perfect example of the system in question, and learn some history along the way. It has led me down a huge rabbit hole and paper trail of information, but there are blanks that we need to fill. This is the story of the Arcadia Systems Super Select System, or ASS. Let's not use that acronym again. This is Trash to Treasure. It's good to be back. So the boxes have arrived and we will open them shortly, but before we do, let's start with the background of the system, and that takes us all the way back to 1983, when the British home computer industry was just starting to catch fire. The Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum were spearheading the market, soon to be joined by the Amstrad CPC. The BBC Micro filled our classrooms, and a flurry of less successful 8-bit micros would come and go, all of them depending on a readily available library of software to be a success. Here in the UK, the medium of choice for that was the cassette tape. Despite being a low-cost format compared to floppy disks, the charts were filled with games in a price bracket of £4.99 to £9.99 and sometimes more. Here's a software chart from the period which shows us the games and the prices. This 1984 top 50 chart shows that number 1 was Fighter Pilot at £7.95 for the ZX Spectrum. A music single, on the other hand, on the very same cassette tape format, could be picked up for under £2. It was Martin Alper, Frank Herman, Terry Medway and Alan Sharam who recognised an opportunity and founded Mastertronic in 1983 with a view to publishing budget video games for £1.99 for all of the popular systems of the day, and it would become a British software success story. Their strategy would be not to sell video games from specialist computer stores, perhaps intimidating to go into if you wanted to buy a gift for someone, but from regular high street stores such as Woolworths, pharmacies, newsagents, and anywhere else that had a peg to hang a game on. Now, I've got lots of fond memories myself of browsing a slat wall or a spinning carousel of Mastertronic games with £2 coins burning a hole in my pocket, and it's those memories that certainly inspired me to recreate that kind of a shop here in the cave, where many Mastertronic games are on display. But the founders of Mastertronic had absolutely no prior knowledge to the video game market. It was their background in video distribution that they applied so well, building a strong duplication and distribution network to reach as many retailers as possible and offering dealers packs of 100 tapes at a time to create an instant display and an appealing choice for customers. This perhaps one of the original boxes that was used to send out those 100 tape packs to shops. With success would come speculation, acquisitions and diversification, and Mastertronic's Martin Alper headed over to the USA in 1986 to set up Mastertronics Incorporated on that side of the Atlantic. We'd see the Bulldog label created to distribute British-made games in the US, and cash flowed readily into Mastertronic's coffers. By 1987, Mastertronic were riding a wave of success and reported to be selling 6 million games per year. It's in this year that they decided to try and tap into the arcade video games market and further increase their profits. Mastertronic has had a busy week, reports Popular Computing Weekly in February 1987. While the UK side of the company was acquiring Melbourne House, that's a competing publisher, the US division has been setting up an operation called Arcadia Systems to produce games for the arcades. Arcadia Systems would be based in California's Silicon Valley, and it was looking for video game developers in the US. This was a big and expensive sounding step. Unlike video games for home computers, one doesn't simply create a game and dish it out to shops on a cassette tape. This involves hardware creation, hardware distribution and support, and success is very brutally measured by arcade operators very quickly. If you fail to impress the public, then your arcade machine will be replaced by something more profitable, and word will spread that your system is a dud. From that point on, it's simply game over. It was an arcade in much the same style as the Nintendo PlayChoice 10 before it, or the Neo Geo multi-arcades, or later the Sega Megatech. And we'll continue that story shortly, but I'm sure you're desperate to see what's inside the box, so let's tear it open, take a look, and we'll pick it up again later. This arrived in two boxes, one a vacuum cleaner and the other a box of Frito-Lay, which are known over here in the UK as Walker's Crisps. But hopefully it's a box of chips in this instance. This first box looks like it's been checked by US Customs on the way through, and it's barely keeping itself sealed shut. Thank you for that, US Customs. I hope we haven't lost anything along the way. From the first box emerges a control panel. Now Aaron salvaged as much of the system as he could. There wasn't a cabinet to speak of, but there were various parts like this, and I asked him to send over, well, all of it. It's enormous, especially for a panel that only hosts 2 buttons per player. And look at the art style, it's extremely plain, it's mostly just plain blue. I will work with Dan at Retrofied to make sure that the control panel is scanned, any other artwork is scanned, and it's all preserved for others to use despite its minimalism. An arcade game that needs a mid-game instructions button is quite curious. I wonder if this whole thing works on a system of time, like the PlayChoice 10, or if the games are modified in such a way that lives work with credits and coins. The switches are all leaf switches, which I know will please Holly, she loves a leaf switch, and the wiring is terminated into chunky connectors to hook it up to the rest of the system, so that's super convenient. It is a very sturdy control panel, and I would guess that this all just works fine. Let's put that to one side now on the table behind me, and we'll get into the other box. I was a bit concerned when I opened this one because on the top was this cracked bit of perspex. Now that may be how it went into the box, it may have got damaged in transit, but thankfully it doesn't show up on the business side. It is an arcade cabinet marquee. It's very narrow compared to the control panel, and again the artwork is minimalist and fairly bland. It's just got the word Super Select System and in small print under it, trademark Arcadia Systems Inc. The font is very late 80s, early 90s in that it reminds me of the Bigfoot monster truck font, if you remember that. The system itself is well packaged in a box within a box, so let's cut down the outer box to get into it. And there it is, it's mounted in a metal chassis, which was also useful for robustness during shipping too. We will take a deep dive into this whole system in part 2, but let's just get first impressions now. The whole thing seems to comprise of 5 main components. First of all, there's the standard Amiga 500 system board at the heart of it. Yes, it's just a bog standard Amiga 500 computer. And from what I can make out, it looks like an early revision 3 board. You don't see many of those around. In part 2, I would like to check all of the custom chips on that board to see what versions we have on there. All of the ports from the back of the Amiga break out into an Arcadia branded board, that's our second component, which then connects to the arcade cabinet wiring loom. So the Amiga is powered through that loom from your standard arcade cabinet power supply, joystick ports hook up to the control panel, video output to the monitor, and there's something attached to the parallel port, perhaps to register credits from the coin slot. Audio breaks out into this amplifier board, that's our third board, and that's got jumpers for stereo or mono output, and then that feeds back into the wiring loom for the arcade cabinet. The fourth part is this huge riser board which attaches to the Amiga's side expansion slot, and it has a metal cage to hold all the game cards. Peering down into it, there are some ROMs on there, which I guess are to configure the system and to get it booting up. And there's also a Dallas real-time battery backed up clock on there. These can leak, so we will want to remove it, and if it's really needed, we'll replace it with a new one. Thankfully, there are no signs of leakage at this point. And then the final part of this system is the game cards, and we have 5 out of a possible 10 installed, so let's get them out to have a look. They all just slot out nice and easily in and out of what look like standard DIN 41612 connectors, or so Richard tells me. The game cards here have as few as 2 and as many as 16 EPROMs on them. Now Arcadia's marketing advertises games with up to 1 megabyte of memory, but I don't know if that was a hard limit or 1 megabyte was just the biggest game that had been made at the time. Looking at the various labels, we can see we have darts, we've got leaderboard golf, Air H is going to be air hockey, ninja, and that one's got various labels missing on it, and SDWR, which I guess is Sidewinder. Air hockey is the one with just 2 EPROMs on it. It's a fascinating looking system. That's our first quick look at it. And as I said, when we get it down in the workshop, we can tear this apart and have a proper look at it in part 2 and see if it works and power it up safely. But I'm already excited about it. Let's find out more about its history.
And before we do, we might be needing the services of PCBWay.com in this series, because their selection of services for PCB design and manufacture, 3D printing, CNC work and lots more besides means they are the ideal partner for retro electronics enthusiasts. Check out the shared projects page on PCBWay.com for easy to order add-ons and upgrades for your favourite vintage computers, and join me in thanking PCBWay.com for supporting projects such as this one.
Our history lesson now becomes very, very UK centric, and that's primarily because all the information I can find is UK based. But obviously it was created in the US, in Silicon Valley, and it was distributed there because the one that I've bought came from Canada, so it made it as far as Canada. Whether it was officially distributed there or not, I don't know. So if you have access to any Arcade Operators trade magazines from 1987 to 1990, and you can find anything about the Arcadia Super Select System, please let me know, because I'd like to get a view from the US side. For this episode though, we'll focus on what happened when it came back to the UK. Here in the UK, it was in October 1987 that it was announced that the Arcadia Super Select System would be shown at the Associated Leisure Preview Show held in London. The original US system was a monstrous affair with very basic artwork. It had that narrow marquee that we saw, which sits at the very top with huge speakers either side of it. And in my opinion, the whole design of the US cabinet is out of proportion. I'm sorry, but it's a hideous design. The screen has this huge surround. It just doesn't look good to me whatsoever. However, when the announcement is made that it's coming to the UK, the first sighting we get of it is this very low resolution scan, which shows a far more compact system. And in time, the UK would adapt a completely different style cabinet, which we'll see later. In the late 80s, there were 2 big shows for arcade operators in the UK. Preview, which was sponsored by Associated Leisure, and that took place at the end of the year. And ATE, or Amusement Trades Exhibition, which took place at the start of the year. Preview would often be the place where new and exciting products would be demonstrated, and ATE is where the bulk of ordering took place. So if you could excite customers with a new product at Preview, then your company would work flat out over Christmas to finish up that unit and build stock for the order book, which would fill up at ATE. With this in mind, it was time to reveal Arcadia to the world. In September 1987, Mastertronic had a stand at the Personal Computer World show and flew a cabinet over from America to excite consumers and journalists. The official show guide, which was kindly photographed by viewer Hermsky, reads, "First time on public display will be the new arcade machine designed by the Mastertronic sister company, Arcadia." It also talks of them bringing US video game champions over to demonstrate it. The same show is then covered in Ace magazine, and in it we see a different style cabinet again, with Arcadia branding and a fairly generic shaped cabinet. It's certainly easier on the eye than the earlier US model that we saw. Next, Arcadia would head to the Preview show a few weeks later in October 87 to try and impress trade buyers, and that in turn would hopefully generate the much needed orders at ATE in January of 1988 to cover the cost of developing the system and hopefully turn a profit. Arcadia, says Ace magazine, is costing Mastertronic several million quid. Despite being an arcade, the target market wasn't traditional arcade venues. This system was designed to go in pubs and clubs, to go at leisure venues like ice rinks, roller discos, or remember them? Or bowling alleys, places like that. And the one that we've got here, as soon as I opened the box, the smell told me that this came from somewhere with a lot of heavy smoke. Old, stale cigarette smoke smells to this thing. So I'm imagining it nestled at the back of a bar somewhere, surrounded by heavy smokers. The PlayChoice 10, which is based on Nintendo's NES hardware, catered to the same market. It didn't try and deliver cutting-edge hardware, but it wanted to deliver a fun, affordable experience, and that's what Arcadia wanted to mimic. Minimal outlay, maximum income, and reusable hardware to reinvigorate income when a new game came along and the success of the old one was starting to wane. Now, the Super Select System wasn't the only version of the Arcadia system, it was the Rolls-Royce version of it. Take a look at this flyer here. This 1987 flyer for a game called is a single game version of the system. It shows the same Amiga 500 system board with a single game board slotted onto it, and it says it offers a quick and easy plug-in conversion to other Arcadia games. And later in 1988 we would see Arcadia's horizontal conversion kit, which is the same single game type system board, but it includes a wiring harness, marquee, joysticks, buttons, everything that you need to convert an existing arcade cabinet into an Arcadia powered one. In this instance it's advertising the game Road Wars, but in May 1988's edition of Coin Slot we see the first kit released was Leaderboard Golf, a game which has its roots all the way back in 8-bit micros, and we will come on to the selection of games and the development games of this system in its own section because it does deserve some attention in this series, but we will come to that later. When though would we actually get to see the hardware released? Well, Jeff Heath, MD of Arcadia in the UK, said that a limited number of units would be available at the end of 1987. And if tentative operators should need a confidence boost, not only was the system backed by a successful parent company in Mastertronic, Virgin had just become a shareholder in Mastertronic, putting in £4 million for a 45% stake. That was timely, as Mastertronic had secured the rights to distribute the Sega Master System in the UK, but delays from Sega meant the release missed the lucrative Christmas period in 1987. Virgin's arrival certainly steadied the ship, and the Sega deal would ultimately prove to be profitable, but Virgin's investment cast Mastertronic, and therefore Arcadia, in a favourable, stable light, at least from the outside. If you're looking to the year ahead and trying to decide what arcades to purchase to be a success at whatever your venue is, then you at least want to have the confidence that when you put your money down, the company you're buying with won't be insolvent before they deliver the cabinets to you. And that did instill that confidence, I think. Arcadia continued to paint a positive picture as we progress into February of 1988, where Jeff tells CoinSlot that he'd taken a number of orders at a trade show in Frankfurt, primarily for German and Swedish operators. And we then see that in that same month, February of 1988, production is well underway, and Arcadia has reason to celebrate with the delivery of its 100th system to MAM Amusement Sales, and a new exclusive distribution deal is signed between the companies. MAM's Mike Weston called it the tip of the iceberg when he and Jeff held a press conference at a Blackpool trade show. Electrocoin would produce the cabinets for MAM at their factory in Cardiff, and they would increase production from 25 units per week on average to as many as 50 with the new deal, depending on demand. MAM also interestingly let slip that, after some initial teething problems, we are now very happy with the quality of the product which Electrocoin is turning out for us. And I doubt Electrocoin, who were a very experienced arcade maker here in the UK, were too thrilled to see that in print. Mike also outlined his ambition for MAM and the Arcadia system. The important thing is, he says, that the longevity is going to be there. That's the object in video game selection systems. We're not looking for bang, flash, wallop immediately. We want good income, steadily maintained over a long period. It makes sense on paper, but any long-term ambitions that MAM had for the Super Select system would be short-lived. Now, I'm not entirely sure what happened next, but that deal didn't seem to work out very well for MAM and Mike Weston, or maybe there's something I'm missing here and somebody out there can help to fill in the gaps. But it looks like that by October, MAM and UK arcade manufacturer Electrocoin are listed as being the contacts to get more information about the system at the upcoming preview show at the end of 1988. And as the show in November comes around, Electrocoin are then appointed as the exclusive distributor of the Arcadia system in the UK, with no mention as to what happened to the MAM deal. So I can't quite join the dots there. If you can help me, let me know and I'll update you in a future episode. Following that announcement as we enter 1989, two things stand out. Under the Electrocoin deal, we now see Arcadia rebranded in the UK as Electro Choice MGX, and it's available in a choice of Elite or Barline cabinets. Both have 20-inch monitors. The Elite is squatter, it's almost like a gambling style cabinet, and the Barline is a more traditional arcade shape. The name Electro Choice implies that there are plenty of games to choose from, but it's still taking time for them to arrive, and in this advert in January of 1989, well, it says it all really. Instead of a library of games, we get a wall of verbs, and then just filler when they run out of verbs. Fighting, ducking, whacking, avoiding, slicing, slashing, shouting, stereo, sound, 2-player options. Where can you get all of this in one video game? Come and see the ElectroChoice MGX at the ATE show. 1989's ATE, it seems, would be the big push for Electrocoin to try and get the most out of their new exclusive distribution deal and their newly rebranded ElectroChoice. Would it be bottoms up at the bar and a full order book at the end of the event, or would they make an Arcadia Super Select System of themselves? Well, we're certainly going to find out and learn a bit more about the history of this system in our next episode, when I'm going to take the unit down to our workshop. With the help of Holly and Richard, we'll strip it down and test each part of it to see, does it work as a standard Amiga 500? And then we'll add bolt the extra bits on. Could you put the Arcadia output board on there and run Xcopy or Workbench on an arcade machine? Probably, but let's find out. Does the Super Select System board that we have work? Do the games work? Could you produce new games to slot into that? Maybe Richard at Heber could help us with that. We'll have a chat with him and see what he thinks of the possibilities of that. And of course, we'll see the library of games that did come out and consider what games didn't come out. Try and get an overview of the Super Select System or the ElectroChoice, or whatever we want to call it as the series goes on. There's lots to learn. And then we have to make the biggest decision of all. What do we do with it? Do we put it in a Perspex box as a curiosity that works and people can see inside and see the Super Select System? Do we make the monstrous American cabinet? Do we make the first preview cabinet that we saw in the UK that was in Ace magazine? Or do we try and source an Elite or a Barline ElectroChoice cabinet? Let me know in the cabinets, let me know in the comments what you think we should do with it. And perhaps you have a Barline cabinet or an Elite cabinet. There might be someone out there with one who would be willing to sell it, and then we can reunite it with the system and have it. I'm already scanning the cave here, deciding where to put it for visitors to come and try it when they come here. So lots to cover in the series ahead. I hope you've enjoyed today's history lesson, and we'll get a lot more hands on with it in the next episode. Until then, if you like what we do, if you like the preservation work we do, the videos and the museums, head to patreon.com/RMC Retro if you'd like to support everything that we do here. If you'd like to visit, head to retrocollective.co.uk and also check out the museum shop and Heber's electronics shop, which you can find at that same website for lots of goodies to treat yourself to. Until next time, thank you for taking the time to watch, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.